Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our introduction to Dean Ian Williamson. My name is Vijay Gurbaksani. I'm a professor of information systems and of computer science at UC Irvine. I've been at the Merage School for a long time. I'm also the director for the Center for Digital Transformation. Before we get started, I'd like to sort of make a couple of official announcements. First, we are recording this session, as you probably accepted that option. And the second is live transcripts are available. You will see a live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. If you want to receive a live transcript, please click on that tab and you should be able to see a live transcript. With that, let me welcome all of you. Good morning, and I think it's good morning to Dean Williamson, who is in sunny Auckland today, where I just looked, and the high is going to be 78 degrees, so slightly warmer weather than us, though in Southern California we can't complain. Dean Williamson served as the Pro Vice Chancellor and Dean of the Wellington School of Business and Government at Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. In this role, he developed and deployed faculty strategic plan to enhance postgraduate education, which of course is really important to all of us here as access to education becomes ever more important. Increased diversity, expanded international partnerships, established an entrepreneurship and innovation program, and incorporated technology into the curriculum. So Dean Williamson brings a long and storied career to us, and we're delighted to welcome him. And on behalf of the faculty, staff, and students of the Merage School, let me add a very warm welcome to you this morning. I'd also like to welcome Hal Stern, who is the interim provost and executive vice chancellor and chancellor's professor of statistics, prior to being executive vice chancellor, which for those of you not familiar is sort of the chief academic officer at a university. He was also the dean of the Brent School of Information and Computer Science. With that, so the format we're going to follow today, just to make it clear, is the first part of this discussion will be between Hal Stern and Dean Williamson. And then we will go to the questions that many of you submitted as you registered for this event, and then we'll open it up to the broader audience. Please use the Q&A feature because the chat function has been disabled. So I'll be tracking those, and I will moderate the conversation once Dean Williamson and Executive Vice Chancellor Hal Stern are done with their piece of the conversation. With that, let me turn the floor over to Hal, who will take it. We'll have an armchair conversation with Dean Williamson. Thank you both for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Vijay, for the introduction. It's a great pleasure for me to be here and for the armchair conversation without the armchairs. One of the first activities that I became involved in when I was appointed the interim provost was to step into the recruitment of the Merage School Dean. So Ian is really one of the first people I talked to in the new role, and we conversed throughout the recruitment process. So I'm really excited to have this opportunity to talk a little bit more casually with Ian so that we can all get to know him a little better. So good day, Ian.
Good morning, Hal. It's a pleasure to see you, and thank you very much for taking the time to do the session. Just very excited to join and get a chance to learn a little bit more about everyone and hopefully give everybody a little bit about my story.
Great. So you grew up in Chicago, yet have an academic career that's taken you all around the world, about as far from here as you could if you wanted to. Can you give us a little bit of just talk about your career path and how that developed?
Yeah, I am a proud South Sider of Chicago. And I must admit, if I kind of look back, there is nothing that I would have thought about when I was growing up in Chicago that would have suggested that I'd be doing what I'm doing right now, to be quite honest. I remember when I graduated from Kenwood Academy on the South Side there, I think they asked the question of what were your aspirations. And I think I wrote down my aspiration was to get a job and hopefully get married. And that was pretty much it. I think that was about all I had on my mind. And I would just simply could not have dreamed of the career that I've been able to have. And there's been a few things that I think as I reflect upon it that really that stood out, that I think changed just the trajectory for my life and of course the life of my family. One was, just the opportunity to receive an education, to be quite honest. I had the aspiration of going to college when I left high school. I didn't exactly know what that meant, but I knew it was something I wanted to go do. And then It wasn't clear that necessarily that was going to be possible from a financial perspective, but I was really fortunate in that I received an academic scholarship that was supported by a philanthropic donation to attend Miami University of Ohio. This kid from the big city left and went to Oxford, Ohio, which had a population of 12,000 individuals in a very different type of environment. And I was fortunate enough to get a bachelor's degree in management there. And that really just changed everything in terms of how I perceived the world and what I thought was possible for me. And it just set a sense of aspiration for me that I just didn't have before. And then while I was there, I had gained an appreciation for what it actually meant to be an academic. I actually didn't know that was a job. I actually didn't know that being a professor was a full-time job. I didn't actually appreciate what that was. And when I learned about that, and I had some great mentors who helped me along the way, that sparked a light fire for me to think about that. And later on, after a corporate career, I decided to go back and get my PhD at University of North Carolina. And without those two opportunities, to get a world-class education, it just doesn't happen. So that was really key. Along the way, I think two other observations that I made would be that, I really was always fortunate to have people who perhaps saw in me more than what I saw in myself, just great supporters. And certainly my mother and my father, who are both still in Chicago, they always inspired me to do that. My wife, Brandy, certainly, was when we decided we were going to take a chance and move to Australia, she just, that's great, let's pack up the kids and we're going to go. And she was always very ambitious around supporting me in that way. And I think just being able to have those individuals who would always encourage me to look beyond my current situation, don't let that be the thing that defines you. And, I think the other thing that I probably, if I reflect upon my journey that really has stood out is always having the confidence to bet on yourself. I think one of the things that's really been interesting in my career is there's been a lot of times where I've had individuals for a wide variety of reasons that would look at me, see my background, and they simply would just set low expectations for me. They just would not have an aspiration for me being something other than perhaps with a stereotype of what they had seen in the past. And I remember very vividly when I went to Miami University, my first started there, I walked on as a track and field athlete, and later on was able to earn a partial scholarship to pay for the rest of my education. So I went to the academic advisors that they had assigned to athletes, and I spoke with the woman there and I said, I want to major in business. And she said, oh, business is really hard. And maybe you shouldn't do that. It may be difficult and you may not be eligible. You won't be able to run because it'd be difficult to get good grades in business. And I looked at her and I'm thinking to myself, it's college. Everything is hard. And, I walked out of that office and I never went back to that building again the entire time I was there. And it just was clear, she just didn't have an aspiration for me that was consistent with what I thought was possible. So that willingness to just bet on yourself, even though it may not be obvious to other individuals. So, I think a combination of those things, and I just was really blessed. But it all started with that opportunity to get a degree, and that all started because somebody was willing to put forth some support for a person they didn't even know, and that really was amazing to me.
Thanks, Ian. That's really fantastic to hear, and I know that you're aware. A real point of pride for UCI is the large fraction of students that come here as the first generation in their family to go to college, again, with no familiarity for what either college is like or, I always laugh because I had a similar story to yours in that I was the first generation to go to college. And my parents were very supportive though, and they said, you should go to as much school as you want, whatever that means, right? They didn't know about graduate school and the like. And so I think it's a mission, your background prepares you well for our mission here, which is to inform some of our students about the breadth of opportunity in front of them.
Yeah, in fact, that was one of the big things that attracted me to UCI. When I found out about that, and it really, I think it's really important. You can see such a big difference in the opportunities that people have. So it's been fantastic.
So you mentioned that some of the great experiences you've had going to Australia and now New Zealand. Can you talk a little bit about your stops along the way? What your experience has been like internationally, what the culture was like, pieces like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to look at it. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I probably have worked with organizations in at least 26, 27 different countries. And then there's been others that I've visited, but perhaps didn't do work in. And, if I look back, right before we left, this was certainly not part of my plan. This was all because of the opportunities I had to be in an education institution. If I was to be really honest and frank, I don't think I got a passport until 1 year before we left and moved to Australia. It just was never something I thought about. But I was teaching at the University of Maryland, and about a third of my students were not from the United States. And I got a chance to know quite a few of them. And the thing that really sparked this interest in me is that my conversations with them always took me in directions that I never really had appreciated and didn't anticipate. And I just really understood they had a perspective on things that I just didn't understand. And I challenged myself to say, I think I really want to appreciate the world from their point of view and challenge myself to think about that. And I reflected on how much respect I have for them, because here they were coming to the United States to study, and they were doing that in a context that was completely foreign for them. And I said, I really admire that. Can I do that? Can I go to a context that's not comfortable for me and be able to do what I do as a professional? And that was the challenge that that started this. And it started with the opportunity for me to do some teaching at the University of Łódź in Poland, which was a fantastic experience. Certainly, I got off the plane in Łódź. Poland is in the middle of Poland. It is the heartland of Poland. And I was there for about 2 weeks the first time. And let's just say they had never seen anything like me, and I had never seen anything like them. I literally had kids following me down the street, pointing at me going, what exactly is that? And it was just a fantastic experience. And it gave me a lot of confidence to understand, one, I can sort of connect with people from a wide variety of backgrounds, but two, just the importance of being able to see things. And so that's prompted me to take the opportunity to join the Melbourne Business School in Australia. I was there for 10 years. Then I left to go spend some time at the Institute Technology Bandung in Indonesia, which was fantastic. And then I joined the Victoria University of Wellington here in New Zealand. And that really has broadened me out and given me some really interesting perspectives on the business perspectives, on the economy and the role of business in society, but also the role of higher education institutions and communities.
Can you maybe say, I know later on we'll probably get into some questions about Merage and its community, but maybe say a little bit about Victoria and its community in Wellington. That is, how does the business engage with the local community, engage with the university in New Zealand? Later on, maybe we contrast that a little bit with what we might expect here.
Yeah, let me just start by saying that Wellington, New Zealand is a long, long, long way from Chicago in every possible way you might think about that. I really can't say I knew exactly what I was getting myself into. I had fortunately been to New Zealand before I joined the institution. I'd been there briefly, and I knew it to be a place that was beautiful and had a lot of wind and a lot of rain. That was pretty much all I understood about it. But it was, I would cherish the time that I've had in New Zealand. It really has been a fantastic experience for my family and I. And I really am grateful for how the community here embraced me, particularly because it gave me a chance to be exposed to some parts of, to some communities I just never seen before, specifically the Pacifica community. And then also I had the opportunity to do quite a little work with the Maori community, which is the indigenous community here in New Zealand, and learn a lot about their values and their culture. And I think that shaped those two experiences with those two communities really had a profound impact in me thinking about the role of business in society, because in those communities, it's very clear that the economic activity is an extension of culture. And it really is considered and embraced that you think about economic activity as being embedded more broadly in community, as opposed to a facet of community or separate from. And I think that really influenced the decisions we were making at the business school, at the Wellington School of Business and Government, where a lot of the work that we were doing was really developing partnerships that were, if you like, inclusive of a wide variety of sectors of society. So I would spend a lot of time with government agencies, for example, and that would be everything from the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office to certain ministries, to ambassadors, to the head of the Reserve Bank, all the way down to thinking about how I work with small SMEs or small to medium-sized enterprises or CEOs of large companies, but also working with entities like the Red Cross and other civic society organizations. And we were successful in bringing together, if you like, these cross-sector partnerships to tackle or focus research or curriculum around really challenging issues. So we had a chair in the economics of disasters. New Zealand gets earthquakes. And it's had some very devastating ones in the last 10 years. And so we had a chair that focused on specifically on the economics of disasters, working hand in hand with the Natural Disasters Commission of the government, but also the insurance industry here in New Zealand. We had a chair that focused on restorative justice. And so one of the big challenges here is incarceration rates within particular communities. And so that chair, based in the business school, looked at restorative justice practices as a way to help deal with issues around recidivism and also integration back into the community. And it was actually funded by the police, the Department of Justice, and the Department of Corrections. And so you don't normally see those type of partnerships with the business school. But I think it was because we were able to think about economic activity more broadly as embedded in broader community issues that allowed us to sort of have a more holistic understanding of the way in which we as business scholars contributed to our community.
That's really great. As you're well aware, of course, the U.S. is in the middle of its own kind of reckoning with the inequity and the differential treatment across communities, business and other aspects of the communities. So I think some of the lessons learned in Wellington and in the other stops you've made can have a high impact here.
Yeah, Hal, I'll share probably my most memorable moment that really, one of those experiences that I would have never envisioned being able to have was actually attending a Black Lives Matter rally in Wellington in front of the Capitol with thousands of individuals last year. And, being one of the few Black people actually there, definitely one of the few Americans that were there, and just sort of taking in the way in which that group was connecting with the Black Lives Matter movement, what it meant for them, how they were reconciling that with the experiences there in New Zealand, specifically as it pertains to the treatment of the Maori community there. And it really made me reflect. And I mean, one of the individuals that I've always idolized and certainly have done a lot of reading about is Martin Luther King Jr. And obviously we have a celebration coming up soon about his life, but in his 1963 letter from the Birmingham jail, he writes something which, a very famous quote around injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And it goes on to talk about how we're inescapably networked. There's this sense of mutuality that we all have, right? We have a single destiny. And it was really, when I was standing there and I reflected upon that, and I thought about that statement that he wrote, and it really spoke to me about how the experiences that we're having in the US and how they're connected to more global experiences and vice versa. But then, if I think about my role as a business professor and a dean as a business school, how, the activity that we're doing from an economic perspective is just as much a part of that as anything else. And it has to be part of that conversation as well. And so, I'll always remember that. And it really made me appreciate the scale and scope of what we're dealing with more broadly, and how those experiences, while we may think about them locally, are almost always bigger than that.
Agreed. And one of the things I remember about one of our earliest conversations was you were mentioning the opportunity in Orange County in the Latinx community. That is, given the size of that community and the fact that there are a number of significant Latinx-run companies in the area, and asking me whether UCI had really leveraged that connection. And I'm not sure we've done a great job in that space, but coincidentally, Doug Haynes, our Vice Chancellor for Inclusiveness, Equity, and Diversity, has been working with some of our foundation trustees, and there's now a working group exactly in that space. That is, the Latinx community pushing us to do better and offering up, how can they help us do that? Mentor students, provide opportunities to students. So I think those kinds of conversations. In a time where it's been hard to find optimism, there's a little optimism that this time there's a little bit more activity generated out of the Black Lives Matter and the various conversations around culture and inequity. So at least for me, a little bit of optimism there.
Yeah, no, I think listen, I'm a naturally optimistic individual, and certainly I think it's hard not to be inspired when you're at a university, right? Because it is a place it is all about, you can do something new tomorrow. And, and I think it's always sort of gave me a lot of passion about being an academic.
Great. So let me kind of think about the next phase, is as we successfully attract you back to the US from your international forays. It's obviously a challenging time. I mean, sufficiently so in terms of the pandemic that, you're not yet physically here with us, but you're definitely here mentally with us, and we appreciate that. Can you say a little bit about what attracted you to, think about looking at positions in the U.S. and specifically our opportunity here at UCI in Orange County?
Well, if I was to be honest, I would say that I didn't know a lot about UCI. I knew of it, I knew about it in terms of its reputation, but I'd actually never had a chance to visit the campus before. We started the process of me interviewing for the role and the like. But the things that, as I began to sort of do my research and find a little bit, the things that excited me were quite substantial. One, I think opportunity is always about time and place. Right. And so if you're fortunate and you're blessed, you happen to be at the right place at the right time. And one of the things that's really excited me about joining UCI is that where it is. I think Orange County is just this fantastic community that has these wonderful things that are going on that are globally relevant, but also really impactful. Right. So when I think about the economy there, and it's being built around the technology sectors and the medical sectors, and just the importance of those sectors to our broader economy, the importance of those sectors to shaping our lives. And obviously that's become more relevant because of the pandemic. As we think about not just the health impacts, but obviously, we can't even comprehend engaging in our day-to-day life now without intimate use of digital technologies. And we happen to have companies right down the street that are guiding that and they're leading that, which is really amazing. Of course, it is also about UCI. It's also about the fact that this is a fantastic institution, and the fact that the institution has really built a big reputation around its role in technology and thinking about innovation. As I did a lot of research about the business school itself, one of the things that stood out for me was the history of the business school. It's 56 years going, and I think I'm the 13th dean, and it really struck me that one of the prior deans, Lyman Porter, was someone as a scholar who had a huge influence on me in my work. I never met him, but I read a lot of his work. It shaped a lot of the research that I've done. It shaped a lot of the things that I've taught over the years. And just the idea that I'm working in and taking on a role that he held and had an instrumental role in shaping the direction of the institution, that's not lost on me. I think it's always really important to appreciate the history of the places that you're coming to. The impact that the institution wants to have in the area of inclusion and diversity, it very much aligned with my values. And certainly, the opportunity for us to be to illustrate that, to be an exemplar, to sort of shape that conversation. I think universities, if they so choose, can have a bigger impact in shaping the broader conversation through example than anything else. And so, as you mentioned, the opportunities to support the Latinx community, just the broader diversity that happens to be in Orange County. I think I was reading something where almost 40% of the people in the community go home at night and speak a language other than English at the dinner table. That's phenomenal. That's exciting. And just means there's so much opportunity available for how we can impact various communities, both locally, but also what is the role that Orange County more broadly and UCI specifically would like to have globally in shaping these conversations. And I should also share, there was a personal connection. I have an aunt and I have an uncle who relocated from Chicago years ago. They got tired of the winters. They were the smart members of the family, and they came to Orange County, and they've lived there quite some time. And so it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for my family and I, my wife and my 3 kids, to be in a community where we actually have family, which is something we don't take for granted because we haven't had that for quite a long time, having been out of the United States. So we're very excited about it. And I'm particularly excited about joining in the mission that the UCI has forged ahead and getting to know the community better.
So you can say a little bit more about your family. Are they excited about this move?
They are.
They really haven't had, especially your children, much of a U.S. experience.
No, I think the United States it's sort of a mythical place for them to some extent. It's a place they've kind of come from vacations to visit family and the like, and they read a lot about. And it is interesting. Of course, the United States is in the front page of the news in every newspaper around the world. Always, more so now than maybe ever, but definitely throughout their life. And I think it'll be a unique experience for them to kind of touch base with the culture that they came from, and they've kind of received that from their parents, my wife and I. And my daughters are looking at university in the United States, so that's an exciting time for them. It was an easy sell for my son. He's 11. We told him it's about 15, 20 minutes from Disneyland. And he was like, yeah, that sounds like that'll work.
Yeah, that's, I always tell people, UCI is the second biggest employer in Orange County and the second happiest place on earth. So
there you go.
So I know I speak for everyone at the Merage School, the university, and even the county to say how happy we are that you're here virtually and coming here soon to a theater near us. And I know Vijay will get into this with you more, but can you tell us a teeny bit about what your vision is for the path ahead, top priorities, maybe even some of the challenges you're anticipating?
Well, I think the way organizations add value to communities is they focus in on some of the bigger challenges that the community is facing. And if you're able to do that, then you're able to provide something that people value, they cherish it, they support you. And I think that's the way I will start in thinking about what the opportunities are for the Merage School. And it kind of goes back to some foundational elements and thinking about, well, what are some of the bigger challenges that are facing it? And there's no lack of things to think about, particularly as it pertains to the business school. And whether we're thinking about issues associated with talent matches, there's been a lot of research in Orange County which talks about this as great economy, but doesn't necessarily always have the pool of talent that it needs to meet some of its goals. We can think about inequality in terms of access. There's been a lot of research that's looked at everything from the graduation rates to the economic outcomes of certain communities in Orange County. We can think about access to housing and the implications that have. All of these things are broader social issues that have a very clear economic, if you like, or commercial component to it. And I think as a business school, we are uniquely positioned to address many of these things. And so, one of the things that attracted me to Merage is that the focus is on this leadership for a digital-driven world. So what does that mean when we think about digital inclusion more broadly? How can we ensure that we're not just advancing the way in which digital technologies are shaping economic and commercial activity, but also doing that in a manner where they're also enhancing inclusion that these communities are facing? And so, there'll be an emphasis of mine in terms of working with community, broadly speaking, corporate sector, civic society, government, to identify those areas and trying to find matches between that and the expertise we have in the Merage School so we can generate unique programs. And hopefully that generates a more innovative set of degree programs. And I think we should continue. The Merage School has been fantastic in developing new degree programs. I think about our business analytics program, our innovation and entrepreneurship program, the work that we're doing with our executive MBA program. These are all programs that have really made big commitments to develop new approaches towards how we educate people. I like to continue that. I would love to see us develop new arrangements where we're doing more co-design research with community members around the issues that they're focusing on. And I think just more broadly, being more open, opening the doors to a wider set of external stakeholders so that they feel comfortable seeing value in what we do and how we can think about using the university's resources to support those communities. So those are some of the broad ideas. And right now I'm spending a lot of time listening, and which is fantastic, and getting the chance to know individuals.
Great. Thank you so much, Ian, for sharing your experiences and your insights. On behalf of everyone, welcome. We're really grateful to have you as a part of our community. I personally, and again, everyone else on listening in, look forward to working with you to advance the Merage Schools in its mission. And I'm going to turn things back over to Vijay. He's going to do a little Q&A with Ian. Some questions were submitted in advance through registration, but there is a Q&A opportunity within Zoom if you want to add some questions to the mix. So Vijay, welcome back, and thanks.
Thank you so much, Hal. Appreciate the Q&A. Ian, I've now had the good fortune to hear you twice, and I keep getting more and more excited as I hear you sort of lay out your vision for UCI and the Merage School. But first, I want to ask you a fun question. Have you become a fan of cricket yet?
Okay, I must confess I have not. I tried. I really did try. I was in Melbourne. The Melbourne Cricket Ground is, as I gather, is a hallowed ground in the world of cricket. But I didn't quite get that. But I will say, I did try, and maybe and because of my efforts, I actually have become a fan of rugby.
Oh, there you go.
which I didn't think that was possible at all. But I definitely have become a fan of rugby.
As long as you can do the haka, we're good, right?
There you go. There you go.
And I have to say, I felt the same way about baseball when I came here. I tried, and I couldn't understand it. Now I'm a fan. But anyway, on a more serious note, so when you've obviously got a lot of experience at business schools now, and I'm curious to hear about your goals for the Merage School. And I know it's early and you're still in your listening phase, as you put it, but I would love to hear some, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear some, some of the more specific goals you've got so far.
Well, I mean, let me provide the context. In my mind, the field of higher education is in a period of major disruption for a lot of reasons, and I'm excited by that. I don't find that as a bad thing at all. There's two things that I know. One, that the demand for education has never been higher, right? And so we provide something that society needs more now than it ever has. So that's great. The second thing that I know is that the way community members want to receive that education has changed. And it is not likely that it's going to go back to what it once was in some point in time in the past that may or may not have been real in the first place. And so we have this unique opportunity where we know people really desire what we provide, but they want it in a way that's slightly different than what was done before. And why that's exciting to me is because those business schools that are willing to experiment and try new approaches are likely to be the ones that are going to really be very successful and perhaps be more successful than they were in the past. And so more broadly, our story for the Merage School over the next 3 to 5 years has to be a story, and I don't think this is new to the Merage School. It just is a continuation of innovation and experimentation. And so how do we develop new approaches to how we deliver education? And I think I'm inheriting a business school that has gone down the journey very far around the journey around this. And so we have our online offering of the undergraduate program that we're piloting this year. I really commend all the staff and faculty for their tremendous insight to be able to launch something like that. We have a host of master's programs that are relatively new that people have developed over the course of a period of time. I would want to continue that trajectory because I think we'll be rewarded for that. And it's not the case that everything will do exactly be right the first time, but it's the case that we'll create a culture of experimentation and reflection that allows us to really respond. So there will definitely be some activities in our education portfolio that I want to pursue. We have fantastic scholarship by any way you would want to measure it. And certainly what I would want to do is augment that in the sense that it's not just the volume of work that we're doing, and certainly the quality is already there, but how can we ensure that that work is being connected very closely with members of community, business sector, such that the impact of that work is very clear. And actually, as a result, there's a reciprocation where it facilitates more opportunities for us to do more world-class research, more access to resources, more access to data. So that partnership model that I spoke of earlier, I would love to see that happening, particularly in some of our centers of expertise, one of which you lead. That really just seems like a tremendous opportunity. And I think internally to the business school, we talk a lot about, and we study, and we have tremendous research as the faculty on the process of digital transformation. But that's also a story for us internally.
Yes.
And part of the story for me will be leading us through that digital transformation conversation. And that's not, in my mind, the utilization of digital technologies to do something that we were doing before, as much as it is reconfiguring and rethinking about what we can do given the range of digital technologies that we have available for us. And so I'll probably be picking your brain about that and other experts, but I think it's always great if you can eat your own cooking and turn the lens on ourselves and understand how that shapes what we're going to be doing. How do we use analytics as a way to think about an educational tool or a manner in which we run ourselves as an institution? These are the types of questions that I would love to see us focus on internally as well. And
you said so much already, and I could go down any one of those pathways and we could spend half an hour talking about each of those. But I just want to echo a couple of things that you said, because UCI is often ranked as #1 in creating opportunity for allowing people to achieve the American dream. And that's something that I think as a business school and as a university, we're extremely proud of. And we live it every single day. And it wasn't the case when I joined a long time ago. I won't say how many years ago, but you mentioned the diversity of students that we have and the number of students who are speaking a different language at home and so on. And I grew up very much in the same environment, which is I was not the first in my family ever, but it was the first. It was an interrupted generation because of the partition of India and Pakistan. So my parents' generation, nobody got an education, but the generation before them were actually educated. And sort of like how my parents said, just get the highest degree you can. They pushed me towards a PhD, but didn't really know what it meant, like where it would get me. But and it created all the opportunity that I have. So, you know, one of the things that you said, I want to sort of push back, not push back, I want to explore a little more on. You know, I'm a big fan of experimentation, and you know, when you talked about these new programs, we will need to explore within sort of the confines of a UC education how we actually can innovate faster. So because this, you know, like you mentioned, like the online program, there's a real need for it right now because of the way, whether for pandemic reasons or whether for income reasons, uh, people want to consume education in very different ways, and the experience can be very different for different people. How would you plan to sort of accelerate sort of some of the things that we do?
Well, one of the things that people oftentimes talk about in large organizations is the challenges that bureaucracy creates. And
Yes.
certainly I am not, that's not lost on me. That was certainly an experience that I had in New Zealand, you know, being in a state institution where there, the government, the federal government had a very close connection with the universities and had a very close connection or constraints on the type of curriculum. So I appreciate that. But you know, if you look to our counterparts in the corporate environment, one of the things that we can clearly see is that you don't build the whole thing and then see if it works.
Yes.
Right. Right. That's just, it's too research intensive. It's too risky, to be quite honest. And what I've learned is that what you do is you are always creating modules or spaces or activities within programs where you try something deliberately. Right. So you a priori decide this is what we're going to do and this is what we expect. And we test afterwards to see whether it happened. And then you reflect on that and then you scale. Right. And so I think what we begin to do is we look at our existing programs and we say, well, where are some spaces that we might try different approaches, whether it be a different type of modality, whether it be a different type of topic. I think one of the great opportunities right now in business education is, I call it the hyphen, if you like. All the exciting things that are happening in business right now have a hyphen in them, right? There's fintech, there's social marketing, there's impact investing, there's this connection between two disciplines.
Yes.
That previously would have been thought of as being separate and distinct. They're being combined. And part of this is because of technology, and part of this is because of the way in which our communities are evolving. And how do we create opportunities for that combination in our existing work, see how it works, get feedback from our students, get feedback from our staff, and then begin the process of scaling so that when we are able to navigate that more broadly at a bigger picture through the broader bureaucracy, we have a lot more confidence that it works. We have more data, which suggests that, you know, the people who were asking for support will be more confident in it. And we actually are going to be able to execute on it at a higher quality. So I think that's the way it works, right? You start with the big idea, but you don't build the full thing. You start with, okay, that's, you know, if we're going to build a car, we first build some roller skates, and then we build a roller, you know, a scooter, and then perhaps we do a motorbike, and then we build a car. We don't build the whole car at once. That's the process that I think we've seen has been very successful if we look at digital technology transformations in other settings, and I think we can learn a lot from that.
No, I love everything that you're saying because, you know, I did 2 interviews for my research just yesterday with major companies, and both of them said exactly the same thing. One was a major airline that I'm not sure I can mention the name, so I won't, but they just went out and bought a whole bunch of sensors from Home Depot or something like that, or Amazon, I don't remember, but put it in an airport to see what data they could pick up and then see if their ideas for how they could use data better would actually fly. Pun not intended, but you know, which takes me to the topic of digital transformation. So you've already raised some really sort of important issues around inclusion, because technology certainly has, unfortunately, the side effect of creating increased inequality, and access is not the same depending on sort of a variety of socioeconomic factors. And the leadership challenge has gotten way broader than it used to be. I remember 10 years ago, it was all rah-rah technology. And now you look at, for better and for worse, when you see technology platform leaders who have incredible power, whether you agree with their use of their power or not, there's a lot of questions being raised about should Mark Zuckerberg have that kind of power? And, you know, what are the ethics of AI? So And the specific question we got from an audience member has to do with what's your view on digital transformation in education? But if you could take sort of a slightly broader perspective and talk about how digital is changing the world and how education fits into it. And then, of course, the fact that we're here today teaching online classes and having this debate speaks to what we're already doing.
I think the challenge for us as a Merage school, the challenge that I certainly will embrace and will hopefully work with the faculty through, is that we've put ourselves out as the leadership for a digital driven world, that we're going to provide that leadership. And I think that's fantastic. And the challenge we will have to do is we will have to focus on all aspects of what that means, right? And there's an aspect about which is working with businesses to think about what that means for their business models. There's working with communities to think about how they can utilize that to identify services. But there's another aspect of that, which is it also has to deal with the exclusion components that this can happen if there's not proper leadership, right? It's not inevitable, but it requires proper leadership. And so we can't provide leadership for a digital-driven world if we're also not having conversations around, well, what does this mean about workforce representation in the organizations that are providing these services? What does it mean about how communities are actually receiving services through digital technologies that are addressing existing market failures? And that's everything from access to capital, to food deserts, to access to healthcare, educational outcomes. It also has to be, how do we ensure that there are voices at the governance level that are ensuring that the way this technology is conceptualized and utilized is consistent with and reinforces the values of all the various cultures that are impacted by it. And so if I think about what it means for us to say we're going to provide leadership for a digital-driven world, the challenge we have to have is we will do all of that, right? The parts that are dealing with the technical components and the parts that are dealing with the social outcomes associated with that, that is actually what I think leadership actually is. And so then take that a step further as to what it means for education. Well, we have to be able to illustrate that. So our research should be a part of that story, right? Because this is where we have tremendous impact in terms of our thought leadership. And we should encourage and we should be doing work that addresses that breadth of things. Our delivery of education should tap into that. So, we have credibility by providing digitally available educational resources. It would be very difficult for us to say we're providing leadership for a digital-driven world if we're not using that as a way in which we provide education to a wider range of constituents. And to be quite frank, it's really exciting because one of the nice things about digital technology is it challenges some of your underlying assumptions. And one of the underlying assumptions that have been the underpinning bedrock for most educational institutions is that the constraint was how many people can I get in a particular location at a particular time. And we don't have that constraint. We clearly don't have that constraint. And that changes our whole perspective as to who do we think we serve, what are the topics that we think are relevant, and how can we support them? And so that's great. And again, we have to be doing that. And then of course, within our own staff, within our faculty, how are we educating them to utilize digital technologies to support them in their work, their day-to-day? And so obviously we all have gone through this experience of now doing digitally driven work through Zoom for the last several months. What learnings are we going to take from that? I do not anticipate that, post COVID-19, and when we were able to engage in a manner physically like we once were, that means we forget everything we've just done for the last 8 to 9 months around how we manage ourselves via Zoom. It will be a combination of those. And what's the conversation we're going to have internally around that? So that's my perspective on it broadly. And I think there's some specific things that we should be doing as a business school to lead, to provide exemplars around that.
I think that's really exciting. So, I think our choice is going to be in a sort of counterintuitive kind of way, a surfeit of riches, right? Because there's so many different paths, and obviously you want to do it all. And I am really excited about some of the things you're talking about, because that's the challenges and the opportunities in the world that is coming, whether we like it or not. Which sort of takes me to another question for the audience, which is, what is your vision for expanding the philanthropic reach of the Merage School? And obviously resources are key to pretty much any serious initiative. And so it seems like a good segue to that set of questions.
Well, let's just go back to the foundation. What's our value proposition? So our value proposition is that we are able to provide people access to a conversation
Mhm.
that they would not be able to have without our institution. And as a result of that conversation, because of the topics that we focus on, because of the depth of information that conversation contains, because of the people that we incorporate into that conversation, people are able to get information and education that actually fundamentally changes their aspirations and their ability to execute on their aspirations.
Mhm.
So that's what we do. Now, if we're going to engage with other individuals and say, will you support us in that journey? Then we start with that and we say, well, the people who are going to be excited about engaging with us in a philanthropic perspective are going to ask questions around what topics are you having conversations about, right? That's going to be one question. And so in my role as the dean, it's very important that I'm ensuring that we are highlighting the conversations that we're currently having that we think are really relevant for society, but also making sure that we incorporate the needs of society in the conversations that we're focusing on. And that's our research, that's our teaching, right? Because if I go to someone and I say, would you be willing to support us in their journey? And they say, you're not talking about things that I care about, the answer is definitely going to be no. And so that's foundationally one of the ways I'll engage. The other aspect around that would be, do they trust us to be able to navigate that conversation and curate it effectively?
Yeah.
Right. And so we have to show our credibility, and we have tons of evidence to show that we can. But you know, one of the things that is really interesting is I would hope to expand the breadth and the representation of communities that are supporting us as a business school. There are communities that right now we don't engage with, or they don't support us. And I would say it's not because we can't do things for them, it's because they don't believe that we focus on conversations that are relevant to their community, or they don't trust us, right? And so I would look at and say, well, we happen to be in an environment where we have thriving Latinx communities, thriving Latinx businesses. I would love to see that represented in the support we receive from a business school perspective. How do I ensure that those communities feel like we're having conversations at the Merage School that are relevant to them? And how do I ensure that they feel that we trust us, that we can have those conversations in a way that reaffirms and respects the community and culture that they're coming from? And so there's an opportunity here, but every opportunity also represents a challenge. And that'll be the way I position it. And I think that's how you expand the number of individuals that really support you, but also that you're able to go along with.
There's a sort of a follow-up question from Pepina Barca, who's the president of the Dean's Leadership Circle, which is alumni and community members who support the school very actively. And she's asking, I think is asking about sort of what's your vision of sort of how you plan, what's your plan for engaging with alumni?
Well, initially, the goal is for me to go out and engage with as many people as possible, with the goal of me asking them questions to basically tell me about your experience with Merage and tell me about your perspectives around the Orange County business community. I'm very mindful that I'm coming into an existing culture that I don't know a lot about, and I'll have to do the work to acculturate myself, and that is one of the ways that I'll do so. And I really do look for our alums to guide us around that. And then, you know, we have a leadership circle, and we have, I think, various alumni committees that give them voice to provide us with, if you like, input on areas of emphasis, things that they say, this is what we're seeing in our companies, this is what we're seeing in our communities. Can you guide us around that? And, you know, my hope is that that would be a strategic driver for us, that, you know, we can use those inputs to validate our strategic choices.
You know, and they really are. I spoke to an alumni group with some of my colleagues just about our curriculum, and, you know, they're doing so well. It makes me really proud to see. They've got great jobs, they're doing well in their lives, and they gave us very useful feedback. And I think there's a lot of potential for the alumni to work with us some more. One of the things that that some of the questions focus on is the PhD program, which we really haven't touched on very much so far. But any thoughts about the PhD program and what we could do there?
It's tremendously important. You know, it's the smallest program we have, but the impact of the individuals that we train in that is tremendous. You know, we're going to have students that graduate from that program. They're going to go on and have careers, and they may be in the academy for 20, 30 years, and they're going to teach tens of thousands of individuals. And they're going to carry the University of California Irvine name with them as part of their degree for all those journeys. It's really, really important. But like our other programs, the PhD program is also one where we should be pushing the envelope and thinking about how can we be more innovative around that.
Mhm.
We know in our profession that we are encouraging there's a big story about impact, and we are
Mhm.
encouraging academics to think more broadly about the impact that their work has, as well as interdisciplinary. It would be unfortunate if we have that expectation for our peers as academics, if we do not incorporating that into our doctoral program.
Yes.
Right. And so we need to be just as open to those types of innovations in that particular domain as we are in our master's degrees, as in our undergraduate degrees, because we know that the field is crying for those types of scholars. And that doesn't just happen. It happens because we train them that way.
What is sort of the semi-personal question that's being asked, which I think is sort of interesting because you referred to it's about mentorship. Who have been some of the mentors in your journey, and how significant were they, and sort of the impact that you alluded to that, but I guess we're asking for a little more data there. And what would your advice be to, say, students or even staff or faculty about finding mentors?
Well, I think I've been fortunate in that I've had family members who've been great mentors for me. And I feel very blessed in the sense that I actually I was able to have a relationship with my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my father. And all of those individuals, really mentored me in terms of developing me as a person and, and teaching me character and moral, more the foundations. None of them would have been able to teach me anything about getting a PhD. That wasn't their journey in life. And if I think about that, none of that happens if it wasn't for a gentleman, Dr. Wesley King. He was a professor I had at my university. I guess what's the best way I could put it? I was your typical undergraduate. I thought the job, I said, I could probably do your job. How hard could it be? And he looked at me and he laughed. And he said, well, if you really think you want to learn my job, come to my office. And I thank him for that. This thing called research and all these other things. And Wesley really set me on my way. He opened me to a world I didn't know anything about.
That's very
And
special.
I
Sorry,
think
go ahead.
we're friends to this day. And one of the greatest honors I ever had is I happened to be in Malaysia for work, and he happened to be taking a group of students to Malaysia as part of a study tour. And we were there at the same time, and he asked if I would come speak to his students. And I started off by saying, this is one of the most fulfilling opportunities I've ever had, because I will never be able to repay this man for what he's done for me. But the fact that I can come and speak to his class is just as a token of appreciation for what he was able to show me is really quite rewarding. And so there've been other individuals along the way. A woman, Professor D.T.L. Gilvey, who was the dean of a business school and was a mentor of mine, who, she told me, with a PhD, you can do anything in the world. And she inspired me to say, well, if I get a world-class degree and I don't actually have a world-class career or global career, I think I overpaid for this degree. And so she inspired me to challenge myself around that. And so I would say for individuals thinking about mentorship, it's okay to go talk to the people that you admire and ask them, how did you do that? Mm-hmm. Most of those individuals are going to be really excited that you noticed, and are going to be extraordinarily excited about helping you do it as well. And that's been my experience.
It's really interesting to hear you say that, because as you speak, I'm thinking about some of the mentors that I have had over the years. And, it's interesting, because at the time you may not even realize that they are your mentor. Or that you are somebody's mentor. I was just talking to a student one time as a student, and somebody that I was fond of, and she said, I've always thought of you as my mentor. And I said, oh, I was just talking to you. So you don't know when you're going to make an impact, and how sort of these subtle changes, sort of conversations actually move your life in very different ways than you might have planned for yourself without these influences. What memory or lesson from your corporate and academic international work are you holding close to you as you start this new career or new sort of role?
My experiences internationally, collectively, has really, it really has instilled in me what we do really matters. Mm-hmm. I've been able to work in a wide variety of settings, communities in Indonesia, small villages and small towns in Indonesia, where we're looking at how can we use entrepreneurship to create an economic plan for these communities. Communities in Malaysia, very affluent communities in Switzerland, communities in Brazil or Colombia. And the commonality around all of this has been the importance and the role that a higher education institution can play if it decides to do so in pivoting a community in a very meaningful way. Mm-hmm. And so, it's that to me is the underlying thing that I'm taking from all of that I've had the ability to work with a wide variety of communities all around the world, most of whom, I had very little connection with, other than I had expertise in a domain that was useful for what they were trying to achieve. And we were working through an educational institution that had a commitment to seeing that community improve. And if I can bring that to the way we position ourselves at Merage and more broadly at University of California, Irvine, then that's the lesson. I cannot think of a problem that a university cannot make a meaningful impact on. That's not possible for me to think of one.
I think that's fact. I think I'm going to close on the last. You said had lots of valuable insights, but I want to close on something you just said because it really sort of resonated with me. And I think sometimes people, maybe it just takes us being older. I don't know. What we do matters. That's what you said. And that sort of really sort of struck a chord with me because it is, one of the things I like to say often is if you talk to your students, you'll see their stories, because sometimes we just walk into class and we teach your classes and we try to do the best we can. But as you engage with them, you really learn that, everybody comes from varied backgrounds and they're really trying to achieve the best for themselves and their family. So I'll just close with that again. What we do matters. And I want to welcome Hal Stern back into this conversation. But on behalf of the faculty, staff, and students at the Merage School, welcome to Irvine, virtually anyway. And I have to say, I am so excited about what you're talking about. And I'm sure the rest of the faculty and staff are as well. And we look forward to working with you and making both Merage and UCI as successful as we can be. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for all you're going to do for us. Hal, take it away.
Thank you, Vijay. It's really a pleasure.
Yeah, and I won't add more to it than that. Vijay, thank you for and your colleagues for pulling together this welcome program this morning in our brave new video world, as we were talking about the contributions of the digital technology. And Ian, great to have an opportunity to talk to you a little less formally and welcome you. And let me just add my commitment to work with all of you, Ian, Vijay, the rest of the Merage School, as we try to make a big impact on our community, the nation, and the world. So welcome, Ian.
Let me just say one closing thing, because I've known Hal for a long time because he was dean of the computer science of the school of Bren School of Information and Computer Science, where I have a joint appointment. But Hal's role sometimes goes unacknowledged because, being the executive vice chancellor and provost at this difficult time takes human service. Yes. And so Hal, thank you for all you do for us. We really, definitely, we have noticed. I don't get a chance to say this very often, but I do want you to know that we do notice what you're doing, and we're very sort of proud of UCI and what we're achieving. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.